Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning.
Where it's always morning somewhere.
I'm Chris,
And I'm Jen.
and happy almost Pride.
We're very excited. The month of June is an amazing month for many reasons, and not the least of all, that it is Pride Month.
That's right, we gotta celebrate.
We do.
And because we release on Thursdays, we're gonna release our first Pride episode just a few days early.
We're preempting. We're preempting Pride because really, we're not going to box our Pride into a month. We are
Never.
proud all year long. All year long. It's wrong to put it just in June. We are proud all year long, and
All the time.
three,
We're proud all the time.
365, 366 if it's leap year.
Yes.
So, so we are super excited today because we have a really special episode where our beloved Chris is going to share a little bit about his own Pride experience with us. And before we get to that, we want to start with gratitude. And so, Chris, why don't you kick us off with a gratitude moment today?
Absolutely. So I just want to express how grateful I am that there are organizations out there that support the LGBTQ plus community. They all have different ways that they support the community, whether they focus on unhoused youths, if it's legal support. So like nonprofits like the Ali Forney Center, the Trevor Project, the Human Rights Campaign, PFLAG, which stands for Parents, Families, Friends of LGBTQ plus people. All of those organizations truly help show support and provide aid when necessary. And so I am very grateful that these organizations exist and that people pour in time, money, resources because it's needed.
Yeah, I would say I am incredibly grateful to be alive in a time where this is a conversation we get to have. I don't take for granted that, this was not something that was out in the open here in America, you know, for really it hasn't been very long.
Right.
And um, I think I feel very blessed to have been born in a time where the people who I love and adore, um, who this is a real life experience for them, they don't have to hide and feel, as much like they can't be true to themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm also incredibly grateful for the amount of support that still remains amidst all of the controversy today around these topics because, um, I know that it's not an easy path to walk by any stretch, and it's not like it's just getting easier. I don't take that for
Certainly
granted
not.
either.
Certainly not.
And so, Chris, I'm just incredibly grateful that you are willing to share your experience. I'm so very proud of you, and I'm proud to call you my friend. You're an incredible human, and you also happen to be gay. And I know that that means that you have walked some circumstances in life and had to overcome some challenges that I haven't had to overcome myself. And I'm just really grateful and incredibly proud of you for being brave enough to share your experience today, because we know that so many people have their own journey
Yeah.
that looks different for themselves, but that
Right.
may have some similar themes. So thank you for being willing to share a little bit about your own journey of being a proud gay man today.
Absolutely. And I appreciate like you bringing, we've talked about, all of this stuff before and, what we want to share, what we don't want to share. And like, this is definitely a part of my life I'm open and happy to share. I think as I've put more thought into kind of the parts that I wanted to share today, my coming out story isn't like really all that dramatic, and not all of them are. I was not shunned, cut off, kicked out, like any of those things. I'm very blessed in that fact. But I will say there were things that I kind of wish I would have known or been like better prepared for, or just things I just didn't know. And so I think that's kind of where I want to like share from today, is share the experience, but also share kind of the things that I wish I would have known.
Well,
Um,
and I want to double click on that for a minute because, you say, I feel like you're almost minimizing the challenge that you've had to walk through in being who you are just because you weren't like shunned or kicked out or any of those things, which some people are. And that just adds insult to injury. It's horrible.
yeah,
But like, it doesn't mean that this was easy for you. There are things that you had to struggle with, deal with, and overcome
right,
because it this is not a societal norm,
right,
unfortunately. It's novel, and I think there are people who would look at you and say, "You are a gay man," and I say, "You are a man, an incredible man, and you also happen to be gay." Not that I minimize that part of who you are, but it doesn't define you. Like,
right.
you are this incredible person, but certainly the experiences that you've had to walk through and overcome in order to be the person you are are, are unique because of the challenges you've had to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
And so I'm just really grateful that you're willing to share that, because there are probably many other people who, like you, feel like, well, I shouldn't feel like this was so hard because it's not like I was kicked out of the house. It's not like I was shunned. Yet it's still not like it's been easy.
Yeah. And look, I grew up in the deep South, born and raised in Texas. I am the youngest of three children. I consider myself very lucky that through my entire childhood and even my early adulthood, my parents were married and together. And so, like, my family unit wasn't like fractured in that way. A lot of people I grew up with did have families that had been separated. I was also very lucky to have an aunt who lived with us, who's like a second mom to me. Like,
Yeah.
we, um, you know, my childhood was very much so rooted in family, um, and being from the deep South, like also going to church every Sunday. And that was, I was brought up in a Southern Baptist, church and churches. And so that's kind of where, like a lot of the issues that I feel like I had to work through and navigate kind of came from, um, in my coming out story. Like and they were things that, like I had to navigate, like I had to work through. And
Yeah.
I think the hard part of it was that I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to, like to have that conversation with and ask questions. Um, because like growing up, like the word gay was used, like to make fun of people. It was seen as like a mocking term. And so of course, like that idea of being gay was terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
but I would also say I didn't, when when I look back on when I like would have thought that I was gay or started having those thoughts, I was probably like in seventh or eighth grade. Um, so like around 13 or 14 years old. And look, I was a male cheerleader in eighth grade, but that was not because I was gay. I just want to make that clear. That is a part of the story. It is not not
Say
the
more.
precipice.
Say more about that.
No, I was never a super athletic kid. Like my brother was like baseball, football. He was like all of those things. My sister played softball. Like very gifted when it came to team sports and athleticism. I was not that individual. Um, but whenever I saw cheerleading and saw like the cheering, supporting, like getting the crowd worked up and excited, like I liked that. That seemed
Yeah, you're a
exciting to me.
promoter, as we've talked about. That fits your
Yes,
personality.
exactly. So that's why like I jumped into that. And of course, like there was a lot then that came at me for that. I even had like people from like when we would go play and cheer at different schools, like I had people approach me and that was like the first thing they would ask me, are you gay? And it's like, you
How
you
did you
didn't ask my
respond to that?
name, you didn't.
Like, did you even know at that point?
I would say that was like the first like thoughts that I was having, like finding that I was more attracted to men than women. Like that's, I would say it just all kind of happened around the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
And you just were about to say, before I cut you off, that like people coming up to you asking, "Are you gay?" and they didn't even ask your name.
Yeah,
Like it,
so a lot of them I would just ignore because like we're over like we were like behind fences or whatever, and so people would come over and like just start yelling at us, and it was it was easy to ignore and walk away from, but like again, whenever I think back to like the scariness of it, um the hearing it used as mocking and make fun of to make you feel less than, like of course like I didn't want to be gay, like I didn't want to be shunned by my peers, and I didn't I as far as I know, um don't have any gay relatives. um my family did not have like gay friends, did not have people around, so like that was even a community that seemed so far beyond and out of reach. Like I didn't have anything. And this was like also, not seeing a lot of those characters depicted on TV. And if they were, like I wasn't allowed to watch them. So it was kind of like you have this thing inside of you that you think, ooh, maybe, but it's scary. And so suppressing it, like so much of my life was about, hiding it and building a wall and not acknowledging it and doing everything I could to really try to move in the opposite direction.
what did that do to you on the inside?
Um,
Like in those very formative years?
honestly, I don't really think about it being anything that like hurt me personality wise
Yeah.
or relationships wise. I think what I found myself going after was more of the things that would allow me to be happy and successful. So, trying to do well in school, having friends, being involved in extracurricular activities, um, things that I like all of my peers were also doing, but I don't think in the capacity of like trying to not acknowledge something, but instead trying to, they're just doing it. Like that's what
Yeah.
we all did. Um, but I think it was part of like covering it all up for me, like not the acknowledgement of it, if that makes
And
sense.
so, you're from the South, religious culture, religious family, and you know, in that kind of Southern smaller church mindset, um, that you were a part of, similar to what I grew up in. This is not something that is okay. It's
Correct.
something that you're taught you're going to go to hell and burn there forever because
Exactly.
you are gay. So, talk a little bit about like that mental obstacle course.
Yeah, so if it was scary to think as being gay from like my peers and school perspective, thinking from a religious standpoint, like there's no hope for me. Like, it's one of those things that like it was overwhelmingly scary, and this thing about you that's like different. And I think I was under the impression like don't acknowledge it. Don't, like, this is a phase. If I try hard enough I can make it go away. And so I think a lot of that was me focusing, and a lot of my late teens, early 20s was spent volunteering, working at church, like spending a lot of time there.
Just trying to be
um
good enough to reconcile for how you really felt
exactly.
on the inside.
Exactly. And so, and not that I feel like I did that stuff from like trying to earn my way into heaven or whatever, but like
No,
I
you're
did
just
like
trying.
enjoy what I was doing for them, but it
Yeah.
also was like I think I put so much time and effort in because it it was scary, and I think it in a way it was scary, but also in a way it was a group of people who created community in a way. And so yes, I was hiding something and um not being like my true self, but it also, I felt like I had connections. I started making friends with people that I volunteered with, and so whenever I would go to school, I had like a group, if
You know
that
what's
makes
really
sense.
interesting is it's like you find yourself in this community that you've just kind of grown up in. It's not like you necessarily went and sought this particular community out.
Right.
And then it's the community that's informing you that there's something wrong with what's on the inside, and you just have to work hard enough to be the best version of yourself, and that will fall away.
Right.
And it's like you're you, as we all do, you're just craving this sense of community, a little bit of validation, reinforcement, and all of that is just keeping you stuck
Right.
in the same cycle. So h- like how are you not still stuck there now? What happened?
Yeah, so I definitely in my, I would say early 20s, early midish 20s, I had really focused a lot on my career and wanting to be successful, like, putting time, energy, effort into building my career, learning. Um, um, I wanted to buy a house. Like I had goals that I wanted to achieve for myself. And so after I bought my house and I had moved out, I just remember being at home alone. And I was like, I don't have anyone to share this with. Like, I think that's like the first time that I ever really felt alone, because there is no one who knew my truth. There is no one who I could call. Like, I just felt alone. And
You had
yeah,
never like said it out loud to anybody?
nope,
And how old were you at this point?
like 23, 24 years old.
Oh my gosh. So you said when you were like in seventh or eighth grade, you sort of started to realize this about
Yep.
yourself. And I don't know, how old are you in seventh or eighth grade? Like 12 or something. So like 10 years has gone by
Yeah.
and you have never said this out loud to anybody.
Nope. Now I had like I knew this about myself, and
That
so
isn't
like
expressive. How is that even possible? Like what? How,
self-preservation. I mean, if I'm being honest, like I didn't know what, again, like the things that you hear, right, are like growing up in church. Those are like where you begin to your values are kind of created from, and your family
yeah.
values like are kind of meshed in with that. And so this idea of, well, geez, if the church thinks, believes this way, and this is my family, like goes to this church and we operate in this way, um like I did, like there were many times I wanted to just like tell my truth whenever I was just like stressed beyond belief. And to the point where I had written down from my phone, because who remembers phone numbers anymore. Um uh I wrote down like my important phone numbers in case like I ever did decide to, like, if I was just in a place where I just like
Just
blurted
run
it
away.
out, and whatever may have happened. So I did. I kept that in my wallet for a very long time, um, because I was, I didn't know how people would react, and so I think it was just like out of self preservation. I didn't say things. And look, I definitely acted out as I got older, in the way of trying to figure out who I was. Not in any way that was like putting me in danger, or like, and I was not, doing, taking drugs or any of those things. Like, it, to me, it was like trying to figure out who I was. Um, and so, when I'm at this point, when I'm 23, 24 years old, I know who I am. Um, and I think that's when my reckoning really happened. Um, because then I started really, and you and I have talked about this before, this idea of, truth and lies, this idea of, heaven and hell. Like we live in these places of, absolutes.
Very
And
black and white.
right. And they're instilled in the world that you grow up in. And
Yeah.
so I think that's where I had to start like really pulling things apart. Like, how is it that being gay is bad and wrong, and that will send me to hell? But yet, if I were to go marry a woman and have children and lie to her, lie to them, whoever
That
else was
also
involved,
feels wrong. Yeah.
right, that's a lie. And that's something, it's just it doesn't balance out. And so
So it's like your cognitive, logical thinking, reasoning skills, which, I mean, I don't know what your experience was. My experience was being taught that those cognitive, logical reasoning skills were bad. Is that something you were taught as a part of the church?
I don't think it in those terms, like not in that way. It was to me, it was more about like the faith. Like you don't
Mm.
question.
Yeah, you don't question because faith is the opposite of logic. You just have to believe. So
Right.
don't think too hard about it.
And maybe conceptually, like that to me, that more translated into like signs that there is a God, like, versus
Mm.
like this idea of good versus evil, uh, right and wrong. Um, but yeah, so and this is going to sound like so silly, um, but I like
Not at all.
started like researching and like looking and trying to just understand like how people have done this and how they've, what their stories have been. And um you
This
know
is
uh,
back when you had the dial-up internet.
no, this was we actually had wi-fi.
Okay. No, no, this
I'm
is your
not
early
that old.
20s self. You're not that
Yes,
old.
yes. So then I just remember like finding my way onto YouTube and hearing a lot of people's stories and experiences, and
Yeah.
some of the things that really resonated um with some of those things that I was hearing was, until you challenge people in the way that they think, they will always think that way. And so, meaning, if you grew up in a world like I did, where you were not around gay people, but yet they were demonized, villainized, whatever you want to call it, um, you're not challenging the people that you're around to think differently, because if they know your truth, then they have to reconcile that. They have to
Mm.
go through that same journey.
Hmm.
Um, and so I would say like that's really what planted the seed in me coming out, and living my true self, because I'm very close with my family. Like we all lived within like a 5 mile radius of each other when I lived in Texas. Um, my parents, my siblings, my aunts, my grandparents, like we all lived in the same area. Um, and so it was one of those things that I didn't want to lie to people.
Yeah.
Because I also didn't, not that I felt like I owed anyone anything, but like, why should I have to?
Yeah.
Why, if you all get to live the life that you want to live, why can't I live mine?
Yeah.
So
You're
that it's
just
kind of like,
gonna go get it. I love
right.
that.
So, so then I really started, I think I really started with my religion first. Like that's where I really probably had the biggest hurdle to come over, just based on all of these things that are like deeply rooted in me.
Yeah.
Um, and it probably helped that I was at a church where the pastor was beginning to like um preach things that I did not agree with and say things that I did not agree with. And so I think that was probably that, with this like planted seed of challenging these beliefs, probably helped push me. Because I left that church. I was no longer a part of it. And I started then
Well,
down.
wait, but this was the church that your family was a part of, right?
No, this was a
No.
separate one. Yeah,
This was one that you had found on your
correct.
own?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm. Um, and so I met great people there, still in touch with people
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
who I met there. Um, but it just definitely started to shift. And so I would say that was like my religious reckoning. And I for that reason, um, I like to say like I'm no longer religious. I consider myself spiritual. Like I do believe that there is something bigger out there. But that, who am I to say what that is and how it manifests for different people? Like,
I think in my experience, and, as I kind of look back at history, the way that I would define religion is like a tool used to control
Yep.
people. So regardless of the religion, if you look at, many religions, it's like a stick. Um, and it's used to threaten and control and get people to behave in a certain way for whatever end purpose, and not saying that people who would identify as religious are doing that with malintent all the time, but it certainly, to me, has felt like that is what religion is
No.
versus spirituality being something very different, being that connection, that openness, that like relationship, whereas religion is the construct.
Right. And so, and I don't disagree. I think it has taken me a while to get there, but I think, and I really liked the way that you said some places, sometimes, some people, because I do think like depending on where you go, like you have a different experience. And I would say I always grew up like your relationship with God, with your higher power, whatever, that's between you and that deity. Um, and so I think that also was like a part that helped me reconcile all of this. Like, if you want to believe that there's a God that's going to say, well, gay people are going to hell, that's fine. That's yours. But I know my heart. I know my truth. I know who I am. And I refuse to believe that, and I will not accept it. Um,
I think that's a
and
part of your resilience, is your inner confidence and that ability that many people don't have, to really hold true to, I'm going to be okay with me regardless of what you think. Like, where do you think that comes from?
that's why I call this part like my reckoning, because I honestly don't know. Like, I think it was me finally like coming to this place of I cannot make these things connect in no world, in the way that I was raised or taught, or taught from a church perspective. These bridges do not connect,
Yeah.
or these places do not connect. So I think that's where I started to have to truly decide what's important to me, and value system wise, like where where do I go? How do I remain true to myself, but also um, um, live within this world?
What
Um,
what advice would you offer to someone else who's in that place, struggling with that and struggling to find that sense of self or confidence, or overcome that fear of what they might give up? What would you say?
I would say, what is it in life that's most important to you, and are what are you willing to give up for that? And so for me, sitting all alone without having anyone to share my accomplishments with. Yes, I had my family who supported me, my friends who loved me, but I didn't have someone. And for me, I decided the person that I want to be is going to be this person. And then I had to start working through, well, what are the potential fallouts of this? So religion, fallout.
Yeah.
um, and then the next one was family. And you're dealing with people, you're dealing with individuals, and um, I was scared. I mean, I didn't come out until after I had moved out of my parents' house. Um, and I remember us sitting down and having the conversation, and it was emotionally charged, from the sense of there were tears, there were concerns, um, but it was not emotionally charged in the sense of like yelling and screaming and doors slamming and things like that. Um, but it wasn't easy. And at the time, my brother was pregnant with his wife was pregnant with their I think it was their second child. Um, and I was scared. I I want to be an uncle. I love my nephew.
Mm.
I loved whatever child was coming next. Like I didn't want those things to be taken away from my life, and I didn't. He was one of the last people that I told because I was so like the fear there was so great because I guess I just felt like I had more to lose there.
Yeah.
Um, and I've like shared that with him, and you know he is supportive. He, you know, my entire family has been. That does not mean that it was not hard um, at the beginning, because it was. There was tension, there was awkwardness, there was, um, you know, a lot of uneven ground that I think everyone was having to navigate because, again, based on all the things that we are deeply rooted in us, like I am beginning where I've had time to challenge those and think about them and work through them, they had not. And so the where people were on this journey were in very different places.
I think i- one of the things that you've shared with me in the past is, I'm choosing my own words to describe what I've heard from you, but it's like you have this coming out experience, but it's not like you just come out and then it's over and relief happens. Like people are constantly trying to put you back in the closet, and you have to, it's like a process of continuing to establish for people who you really are. In When you take kind of yourself out of out of it, it's like their whole world has to kind of be reconciled
Yeah,
along with yours. And they've grown up in these same sort of constructs of fear over what's going to happen to you. And like, so this experience, yeah, it's yours, it's deeply personal, it is about you. And yet, all the people around you also have a whole experience to go through.
right.
Like, you being somebody who is very in tune to the feelings of the people around you, what was that like?
It was really hard. Like there were times where I didn't feel I had a great relationship with my mom. I still do. Um, but it was tough to have like the person that you felt was like a main line, and she was. She continued to be, but that doesn't mean it wasn't hard on her. And
Yeah.
so, you know, there was a conversation that I had where, you know, my dad asked me to not share things with my mom because she would come home upset. Um, and so that was hard. Like it's hard to hear those things. And again, this was stuff that within my research did not prepare me for them.
Yeah.
So
You
that's
don't
why
think
I'm
about that.
right,
You're very much thinking about your experience because it's like been building and building, and
right,
that's what's in your face, and that's what's gotten you to this place where you had to be so uncomfortable that you were willing to give up everything you had
right,
in order to do this. So you're like, the the noise that is surrounding you with all of that, like, how can you possibly be taking yourself out of that situation and putting yourself in the situation of those around you? Not that I'm suggesting that you should,
right,
um, but it is, from an outside looking in, it is something that you're just kind of not prepared for.
right. And I think that was the part that to me, like I think I was quick to figure out that like it is not on me to manage your feelings. It is not my responsibility to make you feel good about this.
Yeah.
Um and I remember having that conversation and saying like you don't get to pick and choose the parts of me that you want to show up at family events and you want like you get me. And if that's going to be a problem then it's a different conversation. Um we're actually in a I was buying a car and so I had brought my dad along. So this whole conversation happened like in the salesman's office like when he had run out. So it was
A high pressure environment too.
exactly. So it was but you know, I look back on it and I was not I I was not prepared for I think the response the the trickling of the responses, I would say, because so
You
like
thought
what
it'd
you
just
had
be done
said
and you'd get through it,
exactly.
and then everybody knows.
Right. And then done. And it's one of those things that as people are going through it, like it also like takes me back, right? Like you take a few steps forward and then it's like taking steps back. Now I will say by this point in the process, I had come out to my best friend and she was so supportive, and she had actually ended up moving into my house with me, and so I had a great support in her.
That's amazing.
Still do. She is my best friend.
I love it.
And I did ask her to make sure she was okay with me sharing this stuff. But like I remember the conversation when I came out to her, she she had um someone had already given her like a heads up. Um and so when I was talking to her, I think the part that um was hardest for me and her, because we had such a great relationship and talked about all it was almost everything. Um she asked me like, why didn't you ever tell me? Because she and I met when I was a freshman in high school. So at this point we've known each other for 9, 10 years. Um and the only thing that I could tell her was that she was very close with my family, like family events. She was always invited to them. Like she is an extension of our family. Um, and I said, this was not your secret to keep. This was mine. And I would never have wanted you to feel bad if something had slipped um, and so to me, it's mine. It's my secret to keep. And I don't want to put anyone in that situation. And, we talked about it because it's nothing that she ever said or did or any of that. It was me. It was my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions that I had on it. And so we're still great friends, and she's a wonderful human being, and we're always there for one another. Um, but it was one of those things that she was a huge, huge support for me as I was going through this process, because I then start dating, which I hadn't really ever done before.
Yeah.
Um, and when I think about um, the fundamentals of growing up, like you're in school, you're with a bunch of people, you create your friend groups there. And you probably don't think about it in the moment about like the level of support that you bring each other throughout the day as you're going through classes, going to lunch, things like that. Um, it is very different navigating dating, life struggles as you are an adult. And
Yeah.
you have to worry about work. You have to worry about bills. You have to worry about relationships. Like all of like the scale gets so much bigger and the stakes seem to get so much higher. So I started go through my first, like, what I would say heartbreak. Now I look back on it, I'm like, Chris, come on. But it was like the first time that I had ever really experienced those feelings. And I fell into a very deep depression because I had compartmentalized so much, going from work to my personal life, my family life, and like I talk about how compartmentalizing can be good. It can also be very bad.
Yeah.
And so I was never going back and really taking care of those feelings. Um, and I remember one night I had come home. I had my dog Abby at the time, um, and I literally just came home from work and got in bed. Like I think I was fully clothed. Like just came home, got in bed, and it was probably like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I hear um, her like scratching at like the bathtub, and I got up and I was frustrated and irritated, but then I go into the kitchen and her water bowl completely dry, her food bowl completely empty. And that's when I realized like something's going on here that's not good. Um and
Yeah.
so I remember going to work the next day, had an incredibly supportive manager who to this day is still a very close confidant of mine. And I remember us sitting across from one another. We were talking about a task at hand, And she looked up at me and was like, "All right, are you good?" And I was like, "No, I'm not. I think I need to call the employee assistance program." And she literally like gathered everything up and said, um, "I think that's a good idea. Why don't you stay in my office and I'll step out?" And she was incredibly supportive, very understanding. And that was when I started therapy, because I just was experiencing these feelings that I did not know how to manage. And I think, going back to when you're dating in high school, you have these friends who can help distract you. You have your schoolwork. You have this group, um, that I think as we get older, we've taken, out of like not out of context, but it's different. And
Yeah. Well, and you're learning things as you're still kind of younger. The stakes aren't as high, like you
right.
said.
And so yeah, got into therapy. And I appreciate that you called out that I had inner confidence to like get to that place of coming out, but I think the confidence to continue, like how to manage these relationships and how to manage the interactions, like I
You were
needed
losing
help
your
there.
hold on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so had a great therapist who really helped me through, provided me great anecdotes, and I just remember one night, like, especially when it came to my parents. I remember, he provided great context and great ways to interact and engage with them. But I remember one night I was coming home and I called my mom, and my grandparents were staying with them for a little while. So I asked if she could step outside so that she and I could have a conversation. And um, I was it was a rough day. I was overly emotional, probably was hungry. And she and I start talking, and I, shared with her that, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Like, don't get me wrong. There was a point where it was euphoric. I was like, yes, I'm the person that I want to be. I am finally this human being that is free.
You
And
reach the mountaintop, but there's a
yes.
whole range to walk through.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Mountains are rarely just by themselves. They're usually a part of a whole mountain range.
Correct. And so, I had that euphoria, and then it was like now all of this stuff that I was going through. And part of it was the relationship with my parents, and my mom, I think, did a really good job in the moment to reinforce, like, you are my child. I love you and I will always love you. But I just want to remind you that you've known this about yourself since you were 13. Like, I've known about it now for, you know, 3 months. Like,
It's
I'm
still new for me.
right, exactly. And she's like, it's just I'm still figuring it out myself."
I love that
Um,
she had the wherewithal to tell you that
yeah,
because again, like, I don't think that that is necessarily your responsibility to think about because you are still so surrounded by all the things that are happening to you. But how can you factor that in to inform yourself of her reactions
right,
if you don't know? And
right.
so the fact that she shared that with you, I think, is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, like I said, we're still close. We have gone through a lot, and, I am blessed that my parents had the reactions that they did. They were not always easy to navigate. It has not always been simple, but, um, in comparison to many, it's been an easier journey,
Well, again,
but a
I would
journey
say
nonetheless.
we're not in the business of comparing hurts,
Correct.
hardships, struggles, things that are tough. Like, everybody's got their own
Yeah,
journey to walk through, but don't minimize. It's not easy.
right. It's not. So,
So you talked about therapy being something that was really helpful for you. What would you say if you were to summarize a couple of things that you really were able to take away from that? Like, what are the themes that have really helped you?
um, so when it comes to relationships, the question that he would always ask me is, why is it that you have to change? Why is it that you have to show up differently? What, like, um in the journey of people accepting me for being gay,
Yeah.
which was more like focused on my family and close friends. Um but then even like my journey of like navigating this at work now and talking about like what you're doing on the weekends and things like that.
I mean, I
um
remember you weren't like when I started working with you, you weren't necessarily openly out.
no, I mean, no, I mean, I think when you came, I was probably in this journey,
You were in the
probably.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um and I only say that because I do remember us like going to brunch and I brought one of the guys I was dating at the time.
But that was like later on in the
Okay.
and like earlier on in our years spent together at the same place, you were not.
Okay.
You were not. I guess we were working at the same place for a year before you moved. So at some point between when I moved there and before you moved away, so in that year,
Then I was definitely in the journey at that point.
you were in the journey.
Yeah.
But I remember you weren't necessarily out. And I remember the awkwardness of asking what you were doing on the weekend and like all of that. I remember that.
And what I was doing was going out to the local gay bars and dancing and drinking. But you don't tell a lot of colleagues those things, you know?
I mean, it like you didn't know how I would respond or
Correct.
whether
Correct.
that's even my business to know or and I think what's so important in my journey is like the of being an ally is the framing. Like there was a time in my life where having people that were openly gay or you know anywhere on the LGBTQIA um like anywhere in that realm was like very novel. That was not um a thing that I had ever experienced or I kind of was very ignorant of all of that growing up. It's not even something we talked about.
Yeah.
And having a sister who is also in that realm like just but not knowing about that like
Right.
and so I think initially when I started to be exposed to these things, for me, where I had grown up, like that was the label that you put on somebody. Even if you weren't putting that label on somebody as a bad thing, it was like that becomes predominantly a part of who they are.
Correct.
And, we were talking about this, you and I, like, you are not my gay friend. You are my friend.
Right.
And you also are gay. And while that is a part of your life, and there, like we are talking about, are challenges you have to overcome, obstacles that you have, basic rights that I get to take for granted that you don't get to have. It's not something that I should forget about or push aside or isn't a part of life that we should talk about, but like it doesn't define who you are. It's
Correct.
it's just a part of your experience in
Right.
life. And I think for me, coming to that understanding of how to frame it up, um, like was really important because I would always feel very awkward. Like, I know that you're a whole person, and yet it's this novel thing about you. And then I would get really, you know, awkward. And I'd be like, yes, I'm a supporter. I have gay friends, but like, I mean, I have friends who are gay or like, I don't know, how do I even talk about this?
Right.
And I think that was um, like a pivotal part of understanding, like, how do I show up better? It's just remembering, like, the reason I love you is because of who you are. And this is just one aspect
Right.
of what that means for you.
Right. And so I think also in therapy that was a big part of it as well, was coming to that realization like you haven't changed. Like
Yeah.
You
You
are
are
the
who you are.
same person, but now you get to like share this thing that you've been hiding. Like, so what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Um, and like, look, this therapist was great, awesome, asked questions that are hindsight very basic and
Well,
shouldn't like we all should be able to navigate.
probably a
Um,
reaction that was novel to you in saying, "What's the big deal?" Because even as someone who, is doesn't have any judgment around, um, you know, a- any of these kinds of things, I wouldn't have been in a place to be like, "What's the big deal?" Like, it does feel like a big deal. It feels like you're imploding your whole life. And he's going, "What's the big deal?" And I wonder, like, had anyone ever brought that perspective to you
right?
before? Was that
No,
even, did that even feel like a choice to
no,
think about
but
it
I
that
also
way?
don't think that I was in a place like earlier on
Thought
to have
that
been
way.
able to be in that space.
Yeah.
Like we did a lot of work to get there,
To get to that. But even just the idea that that could be a way to think about things,
right?
like, how novel. What is the big deal?
Well, and you being gay doesn't take away all the other things. It doesn't take away the lived experiences, the memories, the all of that. Like that doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Um, and so that one, and then I think when it came to dating, this idea of think of dating as trying on coats. Like you put on a coat, maybe the fit is right. You put on another coat, the fit isn't right. Maybe it's right for the season, but not right for the year. Like whatever it may be, because I think in my mind, I was working more in these like grandiose themes, like, ooh, this could be the one. And he's like, why are you looking for the one? Just like go experience
It very
dating
much
and getting
sounds
to
like
know
him.
people. So yes, he's been so good that I have recommended him to many a people. But I think like it was through those things that I truly began to build what I think a lot of people get as they're like coming up through school and they have friends and family and they're not really ever alone. So there's like a level like a safety net.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I had that. So yeah, that I mean, I appreciate that I even had that opportunity. And like I said, I started with gratitude for all the nonprofits that do support the LGBTQ community because sometimes you don't have the resources to do that. There are resources out there for this community to be supported when and where needed. So I don't want to gloss over that.
I so appreciate you sharing and being willing to be so vulnerable and open with your experience. Is there, as we bring this conversation to a close, is there anything else that you want people to know?
I think for me, it's being true to yourself. If you are on this journey, don't let anyone tell you it's time to come out. Don't like this is your journey to be on. When you are ready and you feel safe, that's when you take the step. I know that there are some people, especially in today's world, that they are very comfortable and are going through school as openly LGBTQIA plus. That was not my story. That was not the world I grew up in. I know that there are still places in this world where it is not. Be true to yourself, and this is your journey. Be kind to yourself. I do look back and think, damn, how much have I missed out on because I feel like I've started behind and now I'm playing catch up. But you'll get there. And you have this wonderful community that is waiting for you when you're ready. And you do take those steps. I just find it's like such a surreal moment that, um what 10 to 15 years ago, I was sitting at home researching on YouTube and like we're gonna upload this to YouTube. Get kind of like a full circle moment.
That is, that is crazy. That's crazy. Well, thank you for sharing. I am so glad that you shared. I hope that this act of being open brings something to others who may be going through a similar experience, have been through a similar experience, for parents, siblings, friends, aunts, uncles, um, coworkers, to just kind of better understand. I think one of the things that we've talked about is like the humanization
Yeah.
of experiences or things that feel novel. And I just really appreciate your being willing to be vulnerable and share your human experience
Yeah,
so that other people can relate and understand and get a window inside. So thank you for that. And we would
absolutely.
also love to hear from all of you. Are there is this an experience that you have had any um, any experience with, and in whatever way? And is there anything that you would share that you think would be helpful, uplifting, enlightening? We would love to hear from you. You can get a hold of us by commenting wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast, by sending us an email, chrisjeninthemorning@gmail.com. You can text us or leave us a voicemail at 940-278-8129. Um, don't forget to follow us on social. We're on all the social out there as well. But we would absolutely love to hear from you. We know that there are so many people who don't have an outlet to share their experience. Um, and if you're seeking any kind of safe place for support, we also may not be the resource to help, but we can certainly help connect you with the right places. So,
Yeah.
um, we wish you all a fantastic opening to Pride Month. Though Pride is all year long, every day, we are really excited to spend a month specifically celebrating. And thanks for kicking it off with us.
Thanks. Cheers to Pride, everyone. Bye.
Bye.